Hey, welcome back to A Musician and a Filmmaker. Here we are. It's been a hot month because it's been a month. Technically 2 months.
It's been 2 months.
Yeah, because we missed a month.
We haven't done an episode since the end of January.
It feels like an eternity, honestly. I don't know how that time is perceived by our listeners, but from my own sense of perception, it feels like an eternity. And goddamn, does it feel good to be sitting back here in the hot seat talking about an album that I don't know why you chose this, Greg, but here we are.
Well, it's a new year, and it's about trying new things, and we're not adverse to trying new things on this podcast, like switching up episode formats or talking about something that we don't like, as opposed to something that we do like, which, I mean, we've talked about Captain Ron, so that kind of was like a balanced spectrum.
Captain Ron is a masterpiece, okay? You know, I
Exactly. That's what your opinion is. My opinion is that it's a mediocre movie with a few highlights. But anyway.
Agree to disagree.
We're not here to relitigate a previous episode. We're here to talk about... I said to Jordan many times, I said, at some point we're going to have to talk about an album that we don't like and just absolutely tear it apart, because we can only sit here and be wholesome for so long. I think that was like a thing where I was making YouTube reviews and I was like, I don't like being negative all the time. Let's be more wholesome. No. Well, it's going back the other way now. We got to do a little bit of negativity, a little bit of controversy, keep things interesting.
Well, here's the real story, Greg. The real story is that the movies that I've been choosing have been deemed bad movie selections throughout my selections on this podcast. So to offset my bad choices, Greg has graciously donated his own bad choice.
Yeah, because I did say to you at one point, I was like, is there a movie that other people like that you can recommend? Like a critically acclaimed film that you think we should talk about? And I guess you did end up choosing one for the next episode.
Yes, we finally got there. I just wanted to, I wanted to lower expectations so that I could then exceed expectations. It's common practice. You want to you want to undersell so that you can oversell.
Right. Like the bad news first, then the good news. That kind of structure. Bad cop, then good cop.
Exactly, which is the format of this back-to-back episode for this month, And
also thematically ties into the Terminator.
Yeah.
But
yes,
instead of talking about actual sci-fi, let's talk about some weird, like, fever dream interpretation of science fiction instead.
Mm-hmm. Yes, let's.
We're talking about first, actually, we keep interrupting ourselves. We should explain why we haven't been here for 2 months.
Right. Yeah, why? Oh, yes. I guess it's mostly my fault. I moved into a new house that had a massive carbon monoxide leak. And, I basically had to deal with a bunch of that stuff, for my own self-preservation purposes. And it ate up a lot of my time, unfortunately. I couldn't make the time to talk about...
We also have this thing called a full-time job.
Well, yeah.
Which seems to also be a big time vampire.
It's tricky sometimes, I don't know if the listeners know too much about my personal doings, but I am a professional drug dealer, and it's a lot more work than you might think, You
don't just keep everything in unmarked plastic bags?
No, long gone are the good old days. Now you have to sell people, what they're asking for. You have to actually know the product. You actually have to have some sort of business savvy. It's insane.
So yeah, Jordan moved, and it's also just life. Life got in the way, as it usually does in other unspecified ways. So 2 months has gone by, and I mean, we've already changed the episode format, so it's not like we were going to end up on episode 12 on the 1-year anniversary anyway. Mm-hmm. Not that anyone's keeping track other than me, really. And do we have any Animal Collective news that we want to talk about?
Well, actually, as of the recording of this episode, we did get a little bit of news earlier today. There's an Avitair and Sunflower artist I am not yet familiar with. Collaborative.
Is their name just Sunflower?
Is it? I don't know. We already
Superflower.
Superflower. That's right. See, that's how little.
That's how new this announcement
And
is.
that's how new it is, but also how little that aspect of the announcement meant to me is that I couldn't even commit that artist's name into my memory. It was just Avi Tear, Avi Tear, Avi Tear. I'm considering this to be an Avi Tear EP that's being released. That's how I'm choosing to look at this.
Yes. Well, it's on their new label,
Dosed.
DOSED, which is the Drop of Sun recording studio in Asheville, North Carolina. They started like a little imprint label. So like Geologist and New Psychoactives and Avi Tear and whatever little side projects that Domino doesn't want to pay for, they're just going to put up on their Bandcamp and sell tapes. So yeah, it's cool that they announced like at first they dropped one EP that's the Superflower side, and then they're going to drop another EP, but they're going to sell it as a cassette live at the shows that are coming up. That's what I've gathered from the information available so far. I've been doing more prepping for the podcast topics than the actual Animal Collective moderating and fanboy.
I got a little sidetracked this morning with the podcast due diligence in the favor of learning more about this Avi Tear thing. So yeah, it does appear it'll be available on the tour, but they're also going to be selling it on the Bandcamp, the Dosed Bandcamp, on April 5th. I'd assume limited quantities as per their last runs of Geologist and New Psychoactive cassettes. I was even considering that I might order one from the Bandcamp on the 5th, but then also try and snag one at the show because I'm getting a little concerned.
Wait, are they doing it? Are they doing both?
I
thought they were only doing it in person and then like later dumping what they have left on Bandcamp, kind of like the Tucson Tracks tapes.
I'm not too sure. I did read somewhere that was going to be released on the Bandcamp page on the 5th. I think that I'm pretty sure. I'm like 99% certain that they'll release some run of the cassettes on the 5th as well. But see, the thing is that, you know, these Animal Collective fans like you and I, Greg, we're like rabid animals when it comes to this kind of stuff. Like,
right.
I've already read on the Discord and like on Collected Animals, there's people that are going to like, you know, swipe up all of them. There's people that are like, you know, like, I can't go to the show. Can you get me
reason.
one?
I'm pretty sure whoever runs the merch table won't just let you come in and grab like 10 cassettes at once.
They better cap, you know, limits per each show because so help me God.
I thought I was pushing it when I bought 3 of the Bugwall ones at Meow Wolf. But they were like, no, that's fine. And I was like, okay. I don't want to be the guy that accidentally buys the entire box of Time Spliffs papers for $5 and then doesn't bring them back.
Can you imagine?
And then everyone's panicking. Who the fuck did we sell that to? Because we just
we sold the entire tour's worth of cassettes to one guy. I'll take 100 cassettes, please. Sure, no problem. I mean, I'm hoping that they put a limit on it, but you know, I'm a little concerned because these fans, I'm speaking from experience, from personal experience here. We're a crazed bunch of rabid animals, so you never know.
Yeah. But I think if the whole idea is to have a label that primarily releases cassettes, you'll probably want to make a bigger quantity or even just leave it open-ended to get another batch at some point in the future. So
yeah.
I also think we should talk about the fact that they are currently mixing Sinister Grift. They finished recording it, and now they're mixing it, as the social media teasers would indicate.
Yes. And, you know, a little bit of information that I guess hasn't been shared on the normal platforms, but it does appear that Sinister Grift won't be coming out this year, unfortunately. It does look like, based on Domino, you know, it's going to be a likely 2025 situation, but that's okay because there's a lot of other stuff, you know, that seems that's going to be coming our way in terms of Animal Collective material. There's a mysterious EP, an Animal Collective EP that's coming out. No one knows anything about it except it's collaborative. And we got this Avi Tear collab EP. We've got, for sure, this Geologist thing will happen this year. I feel like there's no way it can't.
This is the first I'm hearing of that Animal Collective EP. The hell are you talking about?
There's some sort of collaborative Animal Collective EP that they brought. I think it was Deacon mentioned this during some interview. I forget at what point in time. I think it was closer to the end of 2023. But he had mentioned, it might have even been on that Fantano one, that there's some...
Never heard of him.
Yeah, well, he's pretty, like, underground right now. To be honest, I think he's just like Mark Ribbolette with a bald cap on, but who knows?
Yeah, you lost me. I was doing a bit, but now I genuinely don't know who you're talking about.
Neither do I anymore. Anyway,
Well, speaking of geologists, well, first, I would like to say I'm still looking forward to the Jetty soundtrack and documentary itself because I'm a documentary guy, as
You're a
you may or may
documentarian.
not know.
You're a documentarian.
Yes. But I'm also, like, I've got a weird manic fixation on collecting documentary physical media now.
Nice.
I have, like, 10 of them that I bought in the last month just because I was, like, I had one of those episodes where I'm just like, everything is disappearing.
You know,
Time on Earth is short. I need to make sure I have a library.
honestly, it's a wise thing to do. It's a wise thing to do.
Especially with, like, it's a whole thing I'm going to get into at a later point. But just, the reason I brought up Jetty was because I swear to God I had, like, part of a dream was seeing the announcement for them releasing it or announcing it, like, the soundtrack release. And I was like, finally. But then I woke up and I was like, damn it. Still got to wait.
You know, I often have a lot of Animal Collective related dreams that are similar, like about an announcement or something. It's so weird. Obviously, my appreciation for this band has reached an unhealthy level.
Well, you know, it's bad whenever in your dream you can actively be like, this is Instagram I'm looking at. And you wake up and you're like, oh, that's probably bad, right? That's probably not good.
Probably not.
But again, speaking of geologist, we're recording this on March 26th, and that is, in fact, his birthday. So happy birthday to Brian Waits. Yes, as he officially declared on this podcast.
It's true.
Once again, shout out to him for giving me the time to sit down in person and chit-chat. He didn't give me the, I'm in Portugal, cold shoulder like he did, like Deacon did Jordan.
Yeah.
What can you do?
What can you do? What can you do? I think, you know, it's great that we got those interviews, and I don't want to spill too many beans, but Animal Collective fans that are listening to this, we will have more interviews with certain people from the band Animal Collective.
Edgar. It's going to be Edgar.
Edgar, my man.
I'm sorry. Did I spoil it? Shit, I'm sorry.
My man.
I couldn't hold my excitement.
It's fine. It's fine. It's cryptic enough for...
If you're actually an Animal Collective fan, you'll know who that is. If you're not, you have no idea what we're talking about.
Exactly. That you shouldn't be listening to our show in the first place.
Yeah, what the fuck?
We
named it after a Panda Bear song from an album he disavowed.
Exactly.
I mean, come on.
We've only ever really reviewed one Animal Collective related album. God damn it.
That's not true. We did a whole Isn't It Now episode.
Oh yeah, that's what I was talking about. I forgot
Not
about
the interviews, but I'm talking about
Yeah, I forgot about
that and
the Panda Bear. Yeah.
So that's at least
First,
two.
yeah.
But I think we don't want to just do that because then we would have to be an Animal Collective podcast, and we're not. Wink.
Exactly.
But we're also not an Animal Collective podcast.
Exactly. If you want to listen to an Animal Collective podcast, I'm sure someone out there has probably already done that.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. I'd have to open my eyes, I guess. Yeah. Well, speaking of musical collectives of
animals,
human beings with animals in their band names, I'm taking a podcast transition segue course right now. I haven't
started yet.
Completed the first unit yet, so it's not going great. We're talking about Arctic Monkeys. No, we're not talking about any of the albums that you like by the Arctic Monkeys, or maybe you do.
Somebody probably likes this one.
If you do, we're gonna judge you. We're talking about the Tranquility bass Hotel and Casino. I keep wanting to say Casino and Hotel, but it's Hotel and Casino. The 2018 album. I always want to say 2019 because they say 2019 in the lyrics of one of the songs on this.
Because it's about the future.
My brain always thinks, yeah, or maybe they just thought, hey, it's Domino. They'll release it the year after we record this song, or 2 years.
It's likely.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah. Well, what can you really say about this album other than...
It sucks.
It was disappointing. Yeah. Jordan, well, let's backtrack a little bit.
All right.
How did you discover Arctic Monkeys?
Well, actually, I discovered Arctic Monkeys, I think, when the whole world discovered Arctic Monkeys with their debut album. However, I was living in Spain right when that album was. I was moving from Spain. It was like the same year, I think 2005,
Yeah.
and I heard about them. They were a lot bigger in Europe. It's a British band. Like
Right.
lots of bands that are European are way bigger. In Europe, it's kind of obvious. Goes without saying. But I remember, yeah, because when I went to university in Ottawa, like I kind of had this weird dynamic where like people would be like, "Oh, this guy's coming from another country. What kind of music are you into?" And I think in university is when you're like in your late teens and stuff, a lot rides on like what kind of music and
Yes.
cultural shit you can bring to the table. So it's like I was like, well, you guys gotta check out the Arctic Monkeys. They're like this new British band. Their riffs are fucking sick, and their energy is amazing, and it was, and I think in a lot of ways that's why this particular album that we're talking about sucks because it doesn't sound anything like what this band is like. The things that made this band enjoyable to so many ears, it's all been abandoned on this album.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, I would say I had a similar experience of getting into the band, which was when I was in college in 2014. I'm making fun of the fact that Jordan's old by stressing what year I started college. But yeah, that was when I got into the like indie, oh, you got to listen to this band category. Like Vampire Weekend was big for me. Arctic Monkeys, like the first 3 albums I was really into. And AM, of course. I think AM was my entry point in like high school, like the last year, senior year of high school. And then I got really more into like the earlier stuff. But yeah, like you said, college was just the time for that. And then like, yeah, we had to wait a while for the new album. And I mean, after AM, which I think a lot of fans consider it like a sellout album, but I personally think it's just a great pop album, like
Sure.
with like a soft rock kind of aesthetic, like, or even hard rock. Like it's just a fucking rock album, and it's a really good one. And it has a concept and it executes it, and it works for more than one song.
Yeah.
Well, first, actually, this isn't, I think, the first Arctic Monkeys album that I didn't like. We should talk about that because Suck It and See exists, even though most people forget that it exists because it is that bland and forgettable of an album.
Yeah, I mean, they can't all be hits, but in terms of, I'd say Arctic Monkeys catalog, I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I enjoyed the debut album a lot, and then they kind of just disappeared a little bit, and then they kind of fell into that territory where they had become so mainstream that I was like, kind of actively being.
You're saying even by Favorite Worst Nightmare, they were already considered like mainstream? I'm asking because I was 12 when this happened, so I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I think somewhere along there, their rise to being quote unquote mainstream was pretty quick though, because like right out of the gate they were like super popular, and it was just uphill from there. But like I don't know, I think that they I don't know, they disappeared from my radar because I was actively being like a contrarian. So I only kind of like casually listened here and there. Like I definitely didn't like buy any of the albums, haven't seen them live or anything like that. It's almost like it's funny because I think I said about basically the same stuff about Vampire Weekend, where it's like the first album came out like just crushed. I was like, fuck, this is so good. Like this is like the band I'm gonna be following for the rest of my life. And then they got like really famous, and I was like, I'm gonna listen to like weirder music because too many people like this, and it's almost like the sound is, and that the people chase the sound, but then the sound's chasing what the people want, and it's making this weird thing that doesn't feel as natural anymore. But that being said, it's still like the same thing about the Vampire Weekend comparison. Like everything that they make is to some degree of like really good quality, but for whatever reason they weren't like at the forefront of my musical radar. Like every now and again, I'd hear a song and be like, "Man, this song slaps. Who's this?" Like Shazam, and be like, "Oh, it's Arctic Monkeys." Like, fuck, these guys have some really good riffs.
Yeah, really good riffs. That's something that they used to have. That's definitely a true statement. Because man, oh man, the second you hear a good riff on this, you're like, oh, it's just in the background.
Yeah,
It's
there's
not even the driving riff of the song.
yeah.
Oh God. Okay, well, Suck It and See, I just want to reiterate, is the only album that I think I've listened to like 3 times, and every single time I'm like, I don't remember a single goddamn note from that album, and I just listened to it. Like, you'd have to like do the thing at the end of Clockwork Orange where you like sit there, but instead of forcing my eyes open, I guess you just have to keep me from like just restrain my hands and keep them from like covering my ears so that I can actually
keep your ear holes open.
Yeah. Actually, I think that's more of an apt analogy for this album because that's what it felt like. I was like, I gotta listen to it all. I can't just listen to 4 out of 5 and be like, yeah, the rest of the album's shitty. I need to actually listen to it and vindicate that with my experience, which I did.
So what?
It's not a good album.
When you were like, so you became a fan of Arctic Monkeys, and then you were listening to them in real time when they dropped Tranquility Based Hotel and Casino in 2018, and leading up to it, were you like I really just want to break down of the full disappointment here because I'm just imagining because I wasn't really like I wasn't on the rails with the train like you were when it crashed, so I kind of want to see what it's like, Well,
I think when they first announced like the aesthetic of it, here's the thing: I got into Arctic Monkeys before Animal Collective. Like, I was into Arctic Monkeys like a solid year and a half before I first listened to all of Merriweather Post Pavilion.
Mm.
And then the entire like music landscape changed for me, and I was no longer like into the like, I don't want to say generic, but like the more mainstay indie pop stuff. It was more like just getting really deep into the Animal Collective lore and all the ancillary releases and stuff. So by the time Tranquility Base was getting announced, I remember them like debuting the aesthetic and like all that stuff. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I wonder what it'll sound like. And I think your brain conjures a sound based off of the visual that you're provided with this album announcement. And it's like you expect it to be an Arctic Monkeys album. So you expect it to have songs. And not just songs, but structured songs with verses and hooks and riffs and vibes that don't make you want to take like some sort of antipsychotic. And I don't remember if I checked out 4 out of 5 first or if I just waited and listened to the whole thing in one go, like when it dropped. But I do remember being so very shocked when I heard it, I think I was just more like, this is not an Arctic Monkeys album. This is an Alex Turner solo album.
Yeah.
Which I guess this is when we need to bring up Pet Sounds because it's brought up at least 5 times on the Wikipedia page for this album. And apparently that was a big part of the like approach to making this album was like, we're going to just make an album where every song has this like uniform sound to it, but it's like so different than what we did before. But then like, if you know anything about Pet Sounds, the Beach Boys album, people are like, it's basically a Brian Wilson solo album with like a bunch of session musicians playing all the parts that the other Beach Boys normally would have.
Right.
But even though the Arctic Monkeys other album, like this is like a weird mix of that where they had the actual band members playing on the album as well as session musicians from like other bands and stuff. So I took some notes. All right. I took some notes on the background of this.
Okay.
And the first thing that I noticed was that it said that after the release of AM, Alex Turner had writer's block and started trying to like approach a new way to write songs that wasn't just love ballads or love rock out songs. And so I really wish that he had waited longer. It's hard to describe. There's so many ways to describe it, and yet it's hard to put into words succinctly why this album doesn't work. And I know that there are people that love it because of how bold and different and radically stylistically, abstract it is compared to the other albums in their discography. It just, I don't know. You listen to AM and you're like, they're going to come back at some point and they're going to make something even better. You're like, oh man, if this is only their 5th album, can you imagine what's next? Like, especially now that they're super popular and they're playing Do I Want to Know and alcohol commercials in the US. Like, this is like the biggest they've ever been. I can't imagine how much bigger they could go and better. And then it's like that ambition seemed to have been applied, but the songwriting is just so mediocre that you just don't give a shit. Like you're listening to the production, you're like, wow, they put a lot of work into these mediocre songs. And because it is like that Pet Sounds thing, like every song sounds pretty much the same. Like they all have the same organs and analog synths and piano and bass lines and rhythm guitar. And I think that's a big difference, is that the Arctic Monkeys' previous 5 albums, they were guitar led. All of them. No matter what tempo or style the song was, they were all, I don't remember any of them being piano ballads.
No.
It was always like a guitar with some crazy psychedelic filter on it if it was something slower. And then you get to this and it's just like every song sounds the same except for 4 out of 5. And you just, it's 41 minutes long, Jordan. It feels like it's 8 hours long. And you get to that middle song and you're like, wow, I actually feel something again. I'm actually enjoying listening to music instead of just forcing myself to.
I think it's by design, Greg. I think that the warping of time is what happens at this godforsaken Tranquility base hotel and casino. You know, it's like some casino in space or something. You know,
look, I'm all for concept albums. I'm all for cool, David Lynchian vibes, like Stanley Kubrick, weird sci-fi, pop art, what have you. It's not a bad concept for an album. It just doesn't work in the way that they executed it. This is a much better concept for a TV show or a movie than it is an album. If this was the soundtrack to a movie or something, it would probably be less off-putting than it is. But there is no movie that goes to it. The closest that I could say that they got to that is the 4 out of 5 music video, which is great. I feel like if that's all they ever tried to do with this concept, I'd be like, sweet, that was really cool. What else you got? I don't need 11 of those with, and only 2 of them. I don't even know, did they make another music video other than that one? I care so little about that I didn't research that fact.
This period of Arctic Monkeys history, it was a complete blackout for me. So I only fully listened to this album after you brought it up for the podcast. I haven't even seen any of the music videos.
Well, I would recommend you check out the 4 out of 5 one because, I mean, they're definitely aping a lot of imagery from Stanley Kubrick.
I was going to say, is it basically like 2001? Feels like.
Kinda. I would say it's like that and The Shining. There's definitely some Shining vibes. I got to say, from the look of the music video, didn't really look like it was on the moon. But you know what? That's a nitpick.
Now, let me ask you this, Greg. Do you think that this album is a joke? Do you think this is a joke album that they put out there? Because part of me suspected that when I started listening to it, and I feel almost like the closing track confirms that the whole album was a joke.
That's hard to say. I would say that if the car didn't exist. I would say if the follow-up album didn't sound like the car, then it might have just been like a gag album. And they were like, Domino's going to pay us anyway. We're going to make money. I mean, let's just do something totally out there. If I was Todd in the Shadows, this would be a Train Records episode for me.
it feels too it's just unbelievable. I think the album, because I don't know, it's one of those things where it's there's so much to kind of digest with the choices that they made on this album that it kind of overrides some of the individual points. I listened to it for the first go around and I was like, okay, this is boring and every song basically sounds the same and there's basically nothing memorable about the album. And I was like, okay, as an overall listen, that's kind of my vibe I got from it. But I didn't even pick up on the lyrics until the second go around. And I think it was because of the Ultra Cheese. I was like, whoa, well, hang on. I haven't even really been paying attention to the lyrics. I went back and then I started reading the lyrics along the way. And I was like, what in the flying fuck are any of these songs about? This is insane. So I'm like, okay, there's been some Arctic Monkey songs where I guess Alex Turner's using a bit of an ambiguous storyline or whatever, but I don't think there's been anything, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong because you've been listening to them more than me, but anything as kind of weirdly abstract and nonsensical as some of the stuff on this.
Right. Well, if I could describe it best, it feels like when Paul McCartney went from writing stuff Here, There, and Everywhere, or, you know, I Got a Feeling,
Right.
and then went to stuff like Temporary Secretary,
Okay. I mean,
and everyone was like, yeah, this ain't it. Sorry.
I guess, but is that even still as anywhere in the same ballpark as a song like "She Looks Like Fun"? The chorus
Oh my
is
God.
"She looks like fun. Good morning. She looks like fun. Cheeseburger. She looks like fun.
I fucking
Snowboarding."
hate that song. I legitimately hate She Looks Like Fun. I didn't even write anything else other than that in my notes. I just wrote, I hate this song. It's disgusting. I mean, I understand that that's probably what they were going for with the songwriting. I'm assuming that every narrator in one of the songs of this is like a character that's part of this concept.
Right.
So some sleazeball. I get that part. But you're just like, oh, I hate listening to it. The riff just makes you want to like... I honestly, multiple times throughout this, I was like, I'm feeling how George Lucas felt when the holiday special was out there circulating on bootleg tapes. And I just wish that I had a chance to go to every single, whatever server is hosting this, and rub a giant, like, magnet nearby it. Like, get one of those magnets that they used to pick up cars with.
Right.
And just erase any
Scramble the
copy
system.
of this album.
Yeah.
Except for 4 out of 5. Because it is just offensively bad to listen to.
This one's definitely one of the worst.
It's not even like, oh, Animal Collective, they go from Merryweather Post-Pavilion to Centipede Hurts. It's not for everyone, but, you know, the core of the band's sound is still in there. This doesn't resemble anything like Arctic Monkeys. And it's like,
No, not at all.
it's such a stark, like, even just listening to it, you can hear, like, okay, the instrumentals sound fine. Is ruined the second that Alex Turner starts singing over it because it doesn't match. His voice doesn't match the style of music that they're going for. Like, he's trying to do like more of a crooning lounge singer, but it doesn't fit. Like, I understand the intention, but the execution is just, it's like movies have this problem more often than albums. Like, how do you fuck up an album? You have infinite time to make it. All right, I guess not when you have a label and a budget and all that, but
Still though, I like, you know, this album kind of reminded me of something that like the Flaming Lips would put out, you know, and you'd be like, oh, they tried to do this kind of weird psychedelic like space lounge thing, and you know, but then they would release like 2 more albums in the span of 12 months after that, so you just sweep it under the rug and you'd be like, yeah, they tried that. They just keep making music. It's cool. Who cares? But, like, you know, this is, like, legitimately in, like, the full, like, album canon for Arctic Monkeys. So it feels, like, extra shit.
well, that's what's so bizarre. Is this like a Jar Jar Binks thing? Like, people hated it the first time, but fuck you, we're doubling down and doing it again. I mean, the car. I didn't listen to all of the car because I listened to, like, the first 3 singles, and I was like, oh, it's just more of the same shit. No thanks. It's like how I haven't listened to whatever the most recent Killers album is, because, like, they, for some reason, just started putting out an album a year instead of waiting 5 years in between them. And it's just, I listened to, like, what was the one after the one with, there was, I don't even know. That's how disconnected I am from the Killers that I can't remember the names of the albums that I don't want to recall.
There you
because
go.
I only listened to them once and went, nope, this ain't it, chief. Okay, so I copied some things down from the Wikipedia page because I feel like they really, like, it's one of those things where when they're saying it, they're like, yeah, this is a great idea, right? But then when you're hearing it, you're like, what you're describing sounds like a horrible idea, and it's not a surprise that it turned out like this. So yeah, writer's block. Now, this one's not so bad, but it immediately jumped out at me. The musicians performed together in a single room, influenced by images of the sessions for Pet Sounds, as well as Phil Spector's production method.
Oh, jeez.
And I gotta say, maybe they were influenced by the Let It Be production method, in which he took a bunch of good songs and turned them into shit with his cocaine-fueled decision-making. But I don't think so, because that would imply that there were actually good core songs that could have been ruined there aren't songs on this album. There's one song. There's 10 weird experimental ramblings and one song.
I will say that in a little bit of defense, I do think that the title track does have a pretty sick drum groove.
I think I wrote a note down for that one. I said, it's like if Steely Dan was evil and also not good.
Yeah, that's fair too. That's fair.
That one I feel like encapsulates everything that's wrong with the album
entire
in
album.
one track. Every song sounds the same, and there are little like flourishes and little details that remind you of better songs that you've heard before.
It's true.
But then in the context of this, you're just like, no, it doesn't click. It's not the sum of all parts.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think that to add to that, I think it is kind of like the trailer for like the whole album, but in that sense, it also is kind of like the better version of other songs that you'll hear. It's like everything else on the album will sound like a lesser version of this song.
Well, that's why I think they should have started the album with 4 out of 5. That should have been like, you turn on the record, that's the first thing you hear, and you go, I'm in for a great time. And then you hear 10 more disappointments.
Well, they should have actually just not even included that song on the album entirely because it just throws the whole thing off.
Well, then you can't sell the album. Hey, here's 10 completely unlistenable songs. It would have gotten I honestly think that...
But by contrast and comparison...
Its response was elevated by that one song.
Well, for sure. But it's set the rest of the album up for failure. It's like, at least if like the single was the title track, then people wouldn't like go to the album and be like, oh,
it was the second
fuck.
single.
Oh, that was the second single?
It wasn't the lead single.
Oh, okay. Well, then still, it should have been the lead single because then you wouldn't be so disappointed. You know, it's like, I don't know.
You would have just heard that. Well, no, because you would have.
You would have been instantly disappointed rather than...
You would have been instantly disappointed after 6 years. You're like, oh, that's all you got?
Yeah, but then is that not better than like, you know, being given a glimmer of hope? And then being ultimately
like, if the rest of the album sounds like this, then we're in for a great time.
Exactly.
So nope.
It's a
okay.
It's a bit more of a con, you know.
Yeah. So I have 2 more notes from Wikipedia. Its sound has been described as subdued, but warm and classic in the way that musicians who seek out storied mixing consoles aspire to. Can you tell me what the fuck that means? Because I don't know what it means.
Did Alex Turner write that?
I think so. It doesn't say described by who. It just says it's been described as. And you would think if it's attributed to him. As well as, quote unquote, lush and claustrophobic. Not 2 words that go well together.
Lush and claustrophobic?
I think like spacey. I think like open breathing air, like an ambient.
Like there's a lot of
lot
of oxygen, you know, in a lush environment.
And then claustrophobic, it's like
there's not a lot of oxygen.
Those are conflicting vibes. I feel like that basically sums it up. Lush and claustrophobic.
Well, it does kind of, because I get where they're going with that. Like, it was trying to be lush, but it ended up being claustrophobic.
That's what I'm saying. It's one of those like
it's not both though.
Oh man,
it was aiming for one, but
aren't we so smart for coming up with this? No. The melodic songs feature unconventional chord progressions and often abandon the traditional verse and chorus structure. I like that verse and chorus are in quotes as if that's like some foreign concept that isn't the most predominant thing in any songwriting ever.
Well, to this album, it's a foreign concept.
In this album, it's an experiment.
Yeah.
We're going to write an experimental song where we put multiple verses and a hook
in there
that people like. It even goes on to say, the album has been noted for its lack of distinct hooks and its tendency to limit, quote-unquote, casual consumption. Oh boy, I love an album that I can't listen to casually. Something that I can have on in the background and not have my attitude ruined by it.
But you know what, though? It actually goes further than that, because, like, as Animal Collective fans, I think, you know, you could probably agree that there's some music that maybe isn't exactly, like, you know, common consumption worthy from our favorite.
Like I wouldn't throw on Tangerine Reef or
no, but I've walked downtown with like downtown Toronto. For all you that have been to downtown Toronto, you know what I'm talking about. It's a whole spectacle of things to see down there. But listening to Tangerine Reef while walking down there, you get a bit of that sense of like anxiety building up inside you, and honestly, it can be a little cathartic. Whereas I think that this album, if it's going for like this claustrophobic thing that like, you know, your common consumer is going to steer clear of, it's like you even fucked up on like making an album that could be consumed in like a specific scenario if people want to like kind of like vent those kind of more like claustrophobic emotions or whatever. It still sucks.
It's almost like you have to be into this aesthetic to enjoy any of it.
Yeah, and then like what even is
you're
the
not
aesthetic?
into like the 50s like kind of loungy like sipping on a gin and tonic aesthetic, you're just not gonna get much out of this.
Yeah, you'd have to be into lounge music, crooning, but then also have a fondness for like old-timey sci-fi. And
This shouldn't be an album. This should be a Terry Gilliam movie.
yes, it should be a Terry Gilliam movie. That's 100% what it should be.
Or Ridley Scott or Denis Villeneuve or just someone make it a movie, not an album, because it does not work. Turner commented that he took a different approach to writing lyrics than on previous albums. This is going back to the point you made earlier. I wanted to bring this up, noting that he, quote, became less concerned on this album with compartmentalizing every idea to the point where each song became this episode that starts and ends in 3 minutes. 3 minutes? Half of the songs on this album are like 5 minutes long.
I wish.
Or maybe they just appeared that they were that long because they just drone on without any like. There's nothing. There's nothing. It's all shit. I'm being hyperbolic. I'm probably am, but I just
no, you're right. It is shit, and I think that the songs are longer than 3 minutes. They have to be because it did feel like an eternity.
The first one is. Can we do our track by track? I'm not gonna play the clips because I don't want to subject the audience to that.
But I don't even know if I can do a track by track because I don't.
I wrote notes.
I don't know that I can.
So
I have some notes on a few tracks that I found especially bad, but
okay. Well, let me start with Star Treatment, which I think is actually, if you were tricked into listening to this album at first, you'd be like, hey, this isn't bad, you know?
For an intro song,
and then the verse
going
kicks
minutes,
in.
Yeah.
and then he starts singing, and you're like, what? Huh?
Oh no.
Is this gonna go anywhere? And then he just starts listing things. Like it's a list song to like get you into the atmosphere of and the vibe of this concept. But it's just listing things. Like just nouns. There's no like there's nothing musical about it. And I'm like, how is this any different than country music lyrics? You know, like pickup truck, cold beer, 17-year-old girl, like how is it any different?
Those are the lyrics to Star Treatment, right?
Yeah, something like that.
You see, the thing is like, what did Wikipedia say? That he took a new approach to songwriting, to lyrical writing, and yes. It felt less like it was important to compartmentalize lyrics. Is that what he said?
He said he became less concerned on this album with compartmentalizing every idea to the point where each song became this episode that starts and ends in 3 minutes.
So he's less concerned about compartmentalization, and then literally the first song is just a list of fucking things that have nothing to do with each other. That's like,
no, they do. They're all at the hotel. Everyone at the hotel and casino knows this imagery.
Right. Of course.
Again,
I gotta keep reminding myself.
I don't even think they knew what they were
concept.
trying to say when they were trying to sell this album.
This is like, I don't know, like, have they been interviewed like post album? Like, have the rest of the band members, like, has anyone been like, hey, like, what the fuck happened? Like,
no, because I think everyone considers it a success.
Everyone considers
except for the people that liked previous albums.
So except for Arctic Monkeys fans.
A specific sect of them, yes.
Right.
Because that's the thing. There are like fans, people that became fans of the band because of this album, and then there are people that were fans of the previous albums that liked it, and then there were people that were fans of the previous albums that didn't like it. So it's not one thing. Our reaction is the one thing. We don't like it.
Right.
But we don't represent every single person that listened to this.
I guess not. But I mean, like, it's still puzzling to even imagine that. So you're saying there's people that like didn't hear about the Arctic Monkeys, and then this album came out, and then they listened to it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, man, Arctic Monkeys are sick."
Absolutely. There's got to be like, you know how many weird niche subcultures there are on the internet? I don't doubt that there was some sort of like Tumblr group that was into like posting GIFs like this aesthetic, like the 1950s diner stuff, and then someone posts the music video to 4 out of 5 and everyone's like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. This is exactly what I was looking for. What is this band called? But I could be completely pulling that out of my ass. I'm just speculating based on what I know about the world. I'm trying to put a positive spin on this. I'm trying to imagine a scenario where someone actually liked this. And it's weird because I know people that do like this. They're not like the thing I just described. They're not like the type of person that I just described, but they are like people that like both the old stuff and the new stuff. And I'm like, okay, you know what? We all have momentary lapses in taste. I love the Fast and Furious movies, even though whenever I tell people that, they respond with confusion. Maybe it's just that. It's the other side of that, which is you love the Arctic Monkeys, the proverbial you, not you, Jordan. I didn't mean to offend you.
I take
the
offense.
Proverbial you enjoys this album and I don't. And you know what? At the end of the day, I can't knock that. But I'm also never going to be able to wrap my head around it in this specific context because I don't get what someone would get out of this. Like, it's an album. It's music. It's not like, look, Jordan, we're fans of experimental music. Like, obviously, we're Animal Collective fans and
pretty
other
open
bands
minds
like that. But not every experiment is successful, as we've discovered by being Animal Collective fans for years. Mm-hmm. Not everything's going to work for everyone. And this is a big example of that, which is they experimented and they failed in our eyes and ears, specifically our ears.
Our ears. Yeah.
So, what do you mean you've never seen Blade Runner? That was the only lyric I remembered from that first song.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just a list of items.
Which speaks to me because I've actually never seen Blade Runner.
That's not true. You have seen it, and you told me you didn't like it, and we're going to get into it at a later point, Jordan. Don't lie to me, okay?
I've never seen it in its entirety. I always fall asleep at the exact same moment.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe we'll have to do our first, watch along so I can make you experience it. Jordan, I swear it gets really good towards the end.
Everyone says that.
It's all worth it for 2049, I promise.
Everyone says that.
So 1 point perspective. This is the second song.
Right.
The first thing that I thought was, oh, hey, I've heard this song. It's called 2 Weeks by Grizzly Bear. And then he starts singing. And you're like, oh, right. I don't have much else to say about this song other than there's a lyric that says, a stunning documentary that unfortunately nobody else saw. And I'm like, hey, that's the story of my life right there. I can relate to that one lyric.
So you got something out of it.
I got something out of a song that wasn't called 4 out of 5 on this album.
Doesn't it start with Dancing in My Underpants as well?
Oh, probably. I don't care enough to check. But then I did kind of like how it just kind of flowed into the next song, American Sports. But then after I thought about it for more than a few seconds, I'm like, it didn't really need to. It just kind of felt like they put that in there to be like, whoa. Yeah. Aren't you impressed?
Transitions.
I wrote nice transitions, stupid. I like the 70s synth arpeggios in American Sports. I like the sound of that. And then he starts singing. It's like the instrumentals. If this album was just instrumental, it would probably be...
It'd be better.
Enjoyed a lot more than the version with vocals, which is unfortunately the only version you can access without doing some weird AI experiments. And then it just sort of ends. The song doesn't end. It doesn't have an ending. It just fizzles out. That's not the only time that happens on this album. I think the very last song does the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like
give up.
They didn't even care enough. They're like they're done. We're done with the pretense that these are songs. Okay, these are audio recordings that end at a certain point.
Yes. Done.
Doesn't matter when. We already talked about the title track.
That's my personal my highlight because 4 out of 5 doesn't feel like it should be on the album. So I'm considering it an outlier for the concept. But I'm also saying it's a terrible song. I just think that it showcases. It feels like the song that was written. Like Animal Collective, though, they'll try out like a new like sonic palette every album cycle and stuff, and they'll be like, okay, let's try like this setup of instruments and then see what we can do. I'm sure they probably land on a couple songs like, okay, this actually sounded pretty cool. Like let's go with this configuration. I feel like
Yeah.
the title track was probably like the one that they stumbled upon with that configuration. They're like, oh shit, this actually could be kind of interesting if we take this kind of like space age fucking lounge thing. And it was just like that was the template, and then everything else was this just kind of facsimile of the facsimile. Sucks. It's getting worse and worse. Let's move on to the next song, Golden Trunks.
Golden Trunks, I feel like I actually don't mind as much as the other ones.
Unmemorable. I can't tell you anything about that song.
Maybe that's why.
I don't recall this song.
It was a weird degree of unmemorable that it was somehow like, eh. I think this was the one where I first put the note that I was like, his voice just doesn't fit on this album. It feels like it's like when a celebrity does an impression of their own voice. It's like Alex Turner doing an Alex Turner impression. Like he's just making fun of all of the characteristics of his voice.
Kind of. If I could remember it, I would verify.
And then there's the lyric, I'm sure you've heard about enough. And I'm like, yeah, tell me about it. We're not even halfway done. And then there's 4 out of 5, which is just a solid song. I have no notes. It is great. It is really just, it's the only time when I'm listening to the album where I don't feel disappointed and uncomfortable. I didn't even copy down the full title of the next track because it was too long to display on my phone as I was listening to it.
Yeah, I
what is it?
I put
the world's first ever monster truck front flip.
Which I also wrote a note about, but didn't put the whole name. I put monster truck front flip song is the worst.
I said, ever heard of the Beatles? And then I wrote, they really said, here's your radio hit. Now back to this bullshit.
This is my least favorite song.
It felt like a bad version of Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite off of Sgt. Pepper's.
Fair. Yeah. I hated the song so much. I hated it. It's the way that the rhythm is just doing this weird ascending thing is honestly nauseating. It feels like I'm like trapped in like a fucking feels like I'm getting like waterboarded. That's what it feels like.
You know what I can say about this album, Jordan? Is that it feels like it is simultaneously trying too hard and not trying hard enough.
Yeah, it's true.
That's really what it comes across like. It's like they went so far with the ambition of the production that it's like, oops, we forgot to write songs.
Yeah.
But we still made an album. The next one is called Science Fiction, which, I mean, good God. Could you try any less harder? The whole thing is about science fiction. It would be like if we wrote a concept album and one of the songs was called Concept Album.
I mean, the dwarves kind of did that.
Well, we're not talking about a good band, Jordan.
Right, exactly. See, that's the thing, though, is that the dwarves, they have a sense of humor about them, so they would do something like that because it's fucking funny. But
well, maybe that's what this is too, because you were saying, is this album a joke? Maybe this is their is this their sense of humor, and is it just that nobody got the joke except for them? Is this an inside joke that they put thousands of dollars into?
I think it is. We're gonna have to schedule an interview with Alex Turner.
Yeah, I'm sure he's got plenty of free time.
We'll send him this episode first, and then we'll proposition him for the interview.
Our people will call his people.
Yes.
And we'll get it worked out.
We'll figure it out.
On the song Science Fiction, I wrote, even Danzig's dedication to 50s science fiction is less embarrassing than this.
I mean, it really goes to show what you can do with that kind of source material if, delivered the right way.
Yeah. Oh, and this is the song that has the lyric towards the end. So I tried to write a song to make you blush, but I've a feeling that the whole thing may well just end up too clever for its own good. And when I heard that, I said, fuck you.
See, there's more confirmation that this thing's a joke.
But why? Like, if you're like, you know what, I'm signed to this label, I have a 3-album contract, I have this last album that I don't want to do, but I have to, or else I'll get sued. I'm just going to give them this piece of shit and they can do whatever they want with it, and I fulfill my side of the contract. But that's not what this was. This was like, we're coming back after 5 years and we want to blow people away with how we've grown musically and emotionally since then. I'm assuming that's what the pretext would be for any album, any other band with this particular, predicament. But it's like they just actively chose to not keep doing and maybe he did have writer's block and that's fine. But like I'm saying, just take longer time, write more solo stuff. I know he did another Last Shadow Puppets record in between this, but it's like, that's I don't even have words anymore. I just have noises of frustrated anguish.
That's so funny. I'm just reading on Genius the lyrics to science fiction. They've got these like you can click on the lyrics and it gives you like a little bit of a breakdown. Some annotation.
Yeah, that's what Genius is.
It's so
genius.
And more often than not, the lyrics are wrong on this site.
Right.
So with regards to the last lyrics, these lines indicate self-conscious reflection of Alex Turner's lyricism. So he often conflates the words of his music to make it more poetic and intriguing, despite not necessarily saying anything particularly insightful. He fears he may have hidden the meaning of the song too well by burying it in too much flowery writing. So this is him saying that he's actually a really good songwriter, even though it doesn't seem like it, and that somewhere in this fucking jumble of random words is something actually really clever.
That's something that Tom York could say about himself unironically during the Kid A period, and no one would have a problem with it.
No.
You'd be like, yeah, you are a great songwriter, and it's fine that you literally just cut up pieces of paper with little phrases on them, rearranged them in a hat, and then pulled out a slip. All right, what's the next lyric? Where'd you park the car? All right, where'd you park the car? But then when he sings it, it's in a song that has hooks and...
It makes sense in the context of it.
It's frustrating to not just repeatedly keep reiterating that it just
these aren't
is
songs.
Not music.
No.
And maybe I don't want to be that close-minded. I have that hippy-dippy artistic, well, anything could be music, man. That
but not
kind
this.
of thing.
Everything but this.
That's why I'm conflicted, because I don't want to just outright, even though I have been outright saying it for an hour, I don't want to just outright say that because it feels antithetical. Like, I'm also a musician. Like, I would, if someone talked about my music this way and I was trying to do something but it's also like, how self-aware are you that that this could be a failure, no matter, like, you're taking a bold swing. And it's like, you can consider yourself a genius for taking that swing in the first place because others wouldn't. Or you can be humble and be like, you know what, that one didn't work out. I'm going to go back to what people like and swallow my pride a bit and, try not to alienate more of my fans. It could also just be, I don't give a fuck, I'm a rock star.
Yeah, could be both.
I just...
But what
I told you, I'm running out of words, so we got to wrap this up.
We got to wrap this up, all right?
I'm just going to keep going.
Power through.
We have 2 more songs to talk about because we're going to skip over She Looks Like
we already
Fun.
kind of talked about that. Although there is a little bit of a thematic tissue, little connecting tissue between She Looks Like Fun and Bat Phone, which is there is a line about Wayne Manor in She Looks Like Fun, and then I'm assuming the Bat Phone is the phone that Batman uses. So
that is somehow one of the most embarrassing things to ever be associated with Batman. And this is Batman we're talking about. Oh my God. So for this song I wrote, will this mediocre sempiternal nightmare ever see an end? I wrote, if this was their first album, they would not have been signed by Domino. That was the same thing I said about that like 6th Killers album. The one, I think it was like Reflecting the Mirage or something like that. I was listening to it and I was just like, if I'm a record executive being given this album, like, we're the Killers, here's our first album, I'd say, get the fuck out. This isn't good. If the Arctic Monkeys did the same shit, I'd be like, no, sorry, you don't have a future in music. If this is all you have to offer. Like, it's just, I guess it frustrates me that an artist can develop a trust not only in an audience, but also just like a public perception of what you are, and then just completely disregard that for your own self-indulgent. And again, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite for saying this, but just in this specific instance, it just is so like it insists upon itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know that Family Guy meme that's been going around from like 20 years ago?
A meme?
When they're talking about The Godfather. That's what this, it has one trick. It does it over and over and over again, but you just get so tired of it that you don't care.
Yeah. The trick was shit to begin with.
Again, I don't think in a vacuum on its own merits it's a horrible concept, but it's just they didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Like, why can't you find a middle ground between like totally crazy concept of this like science fiction surrealist thing and then also songs that people will want to listen to? Or songs, period.
Well, 2001 Space Odyssey, for the most part, is a boring movie. But when it gets exciting, it gets really fucking exciting. So, they could have made the majority of this soundscape, this boring, unmemorable space age lounge music. I guess, I don't know, maybe the one or two highlights are you said the music video is like 2001 for 4 out of 5, right?
It's more like
it's 4 out of 5.
It's like The Shining, Clockwork Orange kind of. Yeah.
Is that the trip out moment in 2001? Is that? So, it's like people talk about 2001. They're like, it's a great movie, but really they're just talking about that one scene.
You're talking about the very end of the movie?
I am.
Then yes. If I'm tracking what you're setting down, then yes. I can say that is accurate.
All right.
I actually think it's... Okay, so I'm not sure if you brought it up when we talked about the Misfits, but at some point between then and now, I discovered the jazz lounge music instrumental cover album of like the Misfits greatest hits from like 2013 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually better executed
than this.
Even though
it's like
I would say it's even cheesier than this album, but it's still like it works because it's not trying to. They're like, here's our concept, and that's it. It wasn't too big of a concept, but it was just like, these melodies and these songs. Here's what it would sound like as lounge music. Does it really make sense? Why? No, but it's pleasurable to listen to, and because you already remember all of the stuff you've. So what I'm saying is Arctic Monkeys should have done a cover album like Weezer.
They should have.
That would have been less disappointing.
Have you ever heard of a guy called Richard Cheese?
No.
So look up Richard Cheese, aka Dick Cheese, and this guy, he's basically just makes like cover parody, like lounge parodies.
Lounge Against the Machine.
Yeah, of popular albums and stuff like that. Hardcore Richard Cheese vibes on this Arctic Monkeys album, and that's even like with the closer being called the Ultra Cheese. I was like, this is a fucking joke. They Richard Cheesed this album.
But did they? Because that implies that there were underlying songs that they ruined with the style. There's nothing there. It's just style. There's no substance.
It's true.
Other than 4 out of 5, which is like, here's our idea for this concept, and here is a song that you'll remember based around it.
I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine anything outside of doing this for the lols, because there's no other
Having a laugh, yeah?
Having a laugh.
Oh, we're just taking the piss.
What the hell is this?
Like taking a shit.
Taking a piss, mate.
Tossa. All right, let's wrap this up with the Ultra Cheese. I wrote, I don't mind this. And then the beat change happens, and I wrote, just kidding. I don't like it anymore. And then the album just ends on like a, ugh.
Yeah.
Like literally, it's just like, he just goes like, ooh. And then it ends. And you're like,
yeah. It's kind of like when you're like really, really drunk and you start vomiting, and then like that last bit of vomit comes out, and then you just pass out. And you're just done for the night. That's what the Ultra Cheese is. Just some last remnants of the puke that was this whole fucking thing, and then just hits the cold, hard bathroom tile.
How does 4 out of 5 fit into that metaphor? Is that the boot and rally?
4 out of 5 is when you do like cocaine halfway through and you get like that second wind, and then everything comes crashing down even harder afterwards.
There you go.
There you go.
So what we're saying is, kids, don't do drugs.
Or if you are
Unless
going to.
it's marijuana and you live in Toronto or any of the other cities in Canada that have a Tokyo Smoke location, in which case you should go and patronize them. I hear that they have great stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
And their managers are very competent and talented and creative.
we do a lot of research.
Yeah.
Take the work home with us. But I actually meant that you should do cocaine and drink heavily while listening to this specific album, because honestly, I
You got to get in the right mind space.
yeah, exactly. Like, you have to become like some sort of sleazy like lounge goer or something. You have to become
Cigarettes.
you
Chain smoking cigarettes.
chain
for
smoking
sure.
cigarettes. You've got like
With a holder. With like the
with the
foot-long
foot-long holder.
plastic holder.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
And you hold it between your pointer and your middle
And you're
finger.
drinking like whiskey on the rocks, and
Yeah.
you do excessive amounts of cocaine.
Yeah, it's like you're not going to watch a Cheech and Chong movie without smoking pot. I mean, come on.
Come on.
You're not going to watch Clerks 3 without doing a bunch of heroin. I mean, come
Yeah,
on.
exactly. You don't watch Train Spotting and do a little bit of heroin. Come on. Makes sense. You got to get in the zone.
Did they do heroin in the second Train Spotting? I have not watched it.
I've not seen it, but I have seen a different T2. Transition.
We don't do transitions. These are separate now.
Shit.
That would have been good, though. All right. Well, Jordan, if you had to rate this album out of 10, what would you give it?
Oof.
Or even an A to an F scale. Either one.
You know what? Okay, so
Would you rate it 4 out of 5 stars?
no, definitely not.
Oh.
I would rate it. I would give it out of 5. I'd probably give it a 1. I think that given how popular the band was, and still is, to throw this out there, like, you imagine like a bunch of like hungry wolves, and they're all like fucking jumping up at you, trying to get, you're like their feeder, and you normally give them a big piece of deer meat or something. They love that shit. And then this time you got this like rotten meat. It's not even meat. It's like tofu or something. And you
Regurgitated
bile. And then you throw that down to the hungry masses of wolves. And they're just like some of them take a bite and they're like, I'm pretty hungry, but I'm not even going to fucking finish this.
And then you know what they eat instead? They eat you.
They eat you.
The feeder.
Exactly.
You are the food.
Exactly.
That's what, the joke is ultimately of this album, I think, is on us as the listeners.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't want to get any deeper into that because like this album, I don't really have much thought put behind it. Or maybe too much. And therefore...
It's cleverer than you think, Greg. You don't have to worry about that shit. Just like Alex Turner said.
Even I don't understand how clever it is. That's how clever
it is.
God. All right. Well, we did it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put us through this. I didn't realize how painful this was going to be.
It's good though. It's good. What's the opposite of a palate cleanser? Somebody to fuck up the palate.
Appetite ruiner.
Yeah.
It's like this album is the equivalent of brushing your teeth and then drinking a glass of orange juice.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's like brushing your teeth and then eating dog shit.
Yeah. Okay.
To make sure your breath smells good before you start consuming the feces. That's what this album
That's true.
is. Yeah.
Well, I think you can even go further and say, like, you had 3 really good times where your mouth felt nice and fresh, and then one where you had a stinky breath day.
Right.
But then you're like, don't worry, I'm just gonna brush my teeth again and floss and use mouthwash and everything, and your breath is great, and then you eat dog shit.
Yes.
And I can't extend it to the car because I haven't listened to the whole thing, but I'm not going to. Sorry.
Make better music, Arctic Monkeys.
Or just don't.
Or don't.
Make
Or don't.
any more music. Just, you could do like a thing where you do like a legacy touring thing, but you only play the first 3 and 5th albums, and then you could just make $1 million that way instead.
It's a damn shame.
Yeah. Well, on that note, thanks for listening to this episode of A Musician and a Filmmaker. We'll be back tomorrow because we're recording these episodes and putting them out so close together that we're going to try to get back to a regular schedule, but no promises. Maybe we'll end the podcast. Who knows? But join us next time when we talk about a movie, because this is a podcast where we talk about music and movies, and we're done talking about the music. That's how this works. I hope that was clear enough for everyone.
What are you saying?
You know what? It's too clever for you to understand,
Oh!
so just don't think about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, fine. I'll take your word for it. Listen
right.
listen to our next episode for more clever stuff, clever words,
And things.
insightful.
Thank you for listening.